You're listening to the Archaeology Podcast Network.
You have my sword.
And you have my bow.
And my trowel.
Hi, you're listening to episode 50. We're up to episode 50 of And My Trowel. Sorry, professionalism. Okay. You're listening to episode 50 of And My Trowel, where we look at the fantastic side of archaeology and the archaeological side of fantasy. I'm Tilly.
And I'm Ash.
And I hope that you ate a hearty breakfast and second breakfast today, Ash, because otherwise you might get hungry as we chat more with living historian and experimental archaeologist Caroline Nicolay all about historic food. Yay! Welcome back, Caroline.
Thank you. Hello.
So, Caroline, before we had the whole dragon baking incident, we were talking about all of your background in living history and experimental archaeology and the representation of food in fantasy literature. But let's remind ourselves of our current quest.
Yes, indeed. So, we've been contacted by the Lembas, and is it? Okay.
Lembas.
Lembas.
God.
We're professionals here.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've been contacted by the Lembas Appreciation Society, who would like us to analyse the oldest existing sample of Lembas bread, which are some of the crumbs from beneath the stairs of Sirith Ongol, and see if we can replicate the recipe. Now, Ash and I like to eat Lembas bread, probably too much, if, we're being honest with ourselves. But we wouldn't have the first idea about how to reconstruct it, so we decided to ask an expert, and that is why we have Caroline here.
Phew, no pressure.
So we already talked about it a little bit last episode, Caroline, in terms of using living history and experiential archaeology to look at food. But maybe we could go a bit deeper into that, because we talked about sort of general things. But how can we use that to look at ancient or prehistoric or historic food?
It's a very good question.
I'm keeping it very specific. I'm not giving you a massive, broad, vague question at all.
It's pretty good. What I prefer looking at is anything prehistory, especially Iron Age or pre-Roman Iron Age. So before we have any written records of recipes and things like that. So the problem you will straight away encounter is that you can only make assumptions, unless you find an actual piece of Iron Age, Bronze Age, Neolithic, etc., an actual piece of bread, pot with meal stuff in it, and so on and so forth. We can only assume that they could have made this dish because they had three things. One, you have to have the relevant ingredients available at the time in that area. The second is, do you have the utensils available at the time to make the dish that you want to make? And the third is, what is in season at the same time? So strawberries and cream, you can't have them in the winter.
A Neolithic greenhouse.
There's much you can do with rawhide. So yeah, for me, that's how I work. So you really need to start your research with anything you can find from, do I just throw words in like carpology, osteology? You look at seeds, you look at charred remains, you look at pollen analysis, environmental analysis. That's really important to get an idea of what can be foraged as well. Osteology, bone analysis, cut marks on the bones to know if it's just an animal that just died here, or if it has been butchered, and so on and so forth. Pottery analysis, now that we have techniques that can extract data from very small fragments of pots and can let us know if something like fats or dairy products, etc., have been cooked and seeped inside, within the material, the fabric of the pot itself. So there's lots of all of these information, and the one I'm most fascinated about, and I think will change an awful lot what we know about the archaeology of food, is isotopic analysis. Probably another one, strontium analysis.
We're just throwing out words for our listeners now. But
I just know that's teeth. You get it from teeth.
Oh, yeah, to see what people ate.
Yeah.
That's it. So you can look at don't quote me on this too
tell us
much.
exactly the methodology of isotopic analysis now, Caroline.
It's depending on teeth, bones, etc. So you take samples and you can pretty much say that this person has had a diet mainly focused on seafood or meat from land creatures or so on and so forth during a specific time of their lives. And for the teeth, I think you can tell at the last portion of their lives, but also throughout their childhood when the teeth have grown. I cannot stress enough that I was not very good in science and biology.
We talked about this
Listen
last
to the previous
episode, yes,
episode.
how we are all experts in biology and chemistry and things. That reminds me of a study that I read where they were looking, and if you looked at the skeletal remains, it was things like, I think they had, like, they wouldn't have been able to use their feet because they were formed in a particular way that the foot wouldn't have been flat or something. I can't remember exactly what it was, but basically it was a skeletal remains that if you would have looked at it and if you would have considered the time period, which I think was early medieval, the immediate assumption would have been like, oh, this is someone, a beggar or someone of the lower classes or something, because they were malnourished and they couldn't have all of the care that was given to upper class and that kind of thing. But actually the strontium isotope analysis showed that they had been eating fish or they'd been eating meat and these sort of foods that were actually very expensive for the time. So it showed that no, actually they were upper class. So even though we would have thought just from the skeletal remains or from I can't even remember if it was from the grave or something as well, it wasn't even the sort of most high class grave, but just, that you can find out a lot more from what people were eating. Even than just what they were eating, it can tell you a lot about their sort of background and things. Anyway, sorry.
The society too. The society that looks after people.
True, yes.
Yeah,
exactly.
and how it works around people. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, exactly. But So sorry, Caroline. I just thought, I just remembered
that's super interesting.
Yeah.
I've got a question. So you were talking about strontium analysis and isotope analysis. What about bog bodies?
Ooh, this is so good.
Yeah, because surely with bog bodies,
What's a bog body, is Ash?
What a bog body is when it's basically you find a body in a bog. Usually they're in there for I'm not going to say the word potentially. Oh no! Ritual
Don't say
purposes?
it. No.
Oh, hang on. Where is it? Hang on. Wait. Oh no, we've got it. There we go. Ritual. I actually quite like that it automatically goes twice because
maybe not though. We don't know. But basically you find it in bogs, and because of the anaerobic conditions, they are pretty much mummified. Lovely preserve. Yeah. Preservation is lovely.
Wonderful preservation of a violent death. Yes.
So you can see like lots of things that they had on their body, like tattoos, but then also the stomach contents is usually preserved too. So can you find stuff about that? What people are eating?
Yes, and bogs are the most incredible and important and so amazing for archaeology environment you can possibly imagine. It's all anaerobic, so oxygen-free conditions. It's pretty cool. There's no light. It's very acidic, so there's no bacterial development and attacks of the tissues. So basically, yes, you can find bog bodies without anything made of calcium. A bog will dissolve bones. Usually you don't find many bones in a bog body. You mainly have the skin that is tanned by the tannins of the bog itself. You have the hair, you have stomach sometimes, and their content. And that is exactly what I was mentioning. It's one incredible opportunity to know what someone at the time, no matter what the time is, someone at the time had this meal before the body was placed into the bog. And of course, there's a lot of questions and assumptions about bog bodies. There are inhumations in bogs. I'm absolutely fond of the Holdromos woman. That's my favorite bog body, favorite textiles find from the middle of the Iron Age, and that's the one I mainly work on. But you also find, especially in Ireland, in bogs, some food that have been left from way before the Iron Age up to the 19th century. Because bogs...
butter?
Exactly.
Oh, yeah.
Bog butter. It's tubs, usually wooden buckets with a lid on and a rope attached, but it's containers of either butter or fats. And it's the whole question, would have been ritual deposit?
We gotta do it. Sorry, Caroline.
Doot, doot. It can be an offering, but there are quite a lot of them that are attached with a really long rope that ended up in the bog. You usually use bogs, and it's based on evidence from the 19th or even, I think, earliest 20th century in Ireland. You put food in bogs because it's the best fridge.
It's your fridge.
So you slap it in the bog and you have your
their garden as the fridge.
It's like preserving food by digging a shallow hole actually in the ground. It keeps a cool and constant temperature. And it's just perfect.
I'm not sure if I'd trust my dairy products in it though, really.
If you didn't have a choice, maybe.
Maybe.
But then you must have been so disappointed when your rope snapped and you're like, oh, my butter. God.
Yeah, damn it.
And it's kilos of butter. That's the survival food for the whole winter and next spring.
And it's a lot to churn butter. I got into churning butter over COVID for some reason. I can't even eat butter. I just got into it. Yeah, and it's a lot of hard work. So I can imagine be really disappointed if your butter just disappeared into a bog.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oh, well, to the gods then. Never mind.
So these are all like the sort of isotope study and looking at the remains of actual food, looking at lipid analysis, looking at the bog bodies, and when there's actually like food involved. So I guess that's for when we don't have recipes. So is there a big difference in the approach when you're looking at food or like trying to replicate recipes from historic periods versus prehistoric periods? Or do you also look at those things for historic periods?
It's massively different, at least to me, because when you start looking at texts, so be it Roman, early medieval, etc., you don't have very precise recipes. So there's no measurements, if you like. You don't have 100 grams of flour and 200 grams of sugar. You have take all the eggs you have in the house. I don't know. I might have 2, I might have 24. You just don't know. They assume that you know that. Of course you do know that. So it gives you, with these recipes, at least a feel for the type of culinary culture that you have at that moment in time, in that space or in that country. So that's what I can't do. I can't extrapolate that from data or finds or anything at all for the pre-Roman Iron Age or earlier time periods. If you live on the coast, we would assume that you eat much more shellfish and fish and seaweed and things like that. If you live inland, maybe you're more into agriculture and you have husbandry and lots of meat from animals and cereals and so on. It can be the case, depending on time period, but we can't prove that. We just assume that it's the case. Whereas for me, living on the side of rivers in the east of France, I only eat a lot of cheese and a lot of smoked meat. I don't touch the rivers because there's a cultural thing there. Yeah. So when I look at Roman food, I really enjoy it because it's the first time after, say, the Iron Age that I can actually use spices. They have cinnamon and they have ginger and they have black pepper. They don't eat all of them. Some are too expensive, but they have that spice trade that will only grow back to that size in the 15th, 16th century. Yeah. So they send black pepper to Vindolanda, to a fort in Scotland, on the borders with Scotland. So there's so there's a lot, but I would never ever have thought about, say, one of my favorite dishes is you boil leeks. So you chop leeks into, say, the width of a hand length, boil them so they are very soft and mushy, drain them, and you serve them as a salad. Very traditional in France. You serve them with a vinaigrette. But in the Roman recipe, you have fish sauce and a herb, usually fresh mint or something like that. And you can add
mint.
Oh, yes. And a very sweet wine or a sharp white wine, something a bit vinegary and sweet at the same time. And honestly,
I'm really hungry.
I'm so sorry. It's so good. Fish sauce really add that, the fifth sense, the umami flavor that you have with soy sauce and things like that. It really adds that. And it doesn't taste or smell of fish at all once you submit it to heat. So in Roman recipes, you can have a sort of fruit flan as a dessert or sweet dish. Imagine so a lot of eggs, and you have pears and cumin and white wine, all fine, and a teaspoon, a little amount of fish sauce. And you think, no, I'm going to replace it by salt. So I tested that with the fish sauce and with the salt. Honestly, because it's cooked afterwards, go for the fish sauce if you can, because it changes. There's a chemical reaction between the fish sauce, the saltiness, the umami flavors, and the sweetness of the pears, the spiciness of the cumin. Anyways, it just works.
Caroline, you need to stop. I'm actually drooling.
I love how this is also now turned into like a cooking blog, like a cooking show. Oh, no, you have to make sure.
Down for
But this is showing, like you were saying, the importance of using the experimental approach, the experiential approach to investigate these and look not just at the actual like ingredients, but at the feeling of eating them. The vibes. See, this is what we were talking about last episode. We were talking about the vibes versus the like picturing. There we go. This is all about the vibes.
Oh no, get back here.
What? Who are you talking to?
Look, the sourdough starter has escaped from the cellar and is making a break for the window.
Oh no! Hang on, everyone. We'll just recapture it and get right back to work. Wow, that starter has really developed.
It's getting so strong. We heard it safely back in the cellar. So let's get back to our quest.
Yes, exactly. So we talked a little bit before the escapee about the kind of different approaches that we can use when looking at ancient food and all of that kind of stuff. But I have to say, so with this quest, we're trying to work out how to replicate this recipe for Lembas bread. So what would you say, Caroline, is the most important thing to consider when trying to replicate a particular type of ancient food?
Oh, yeah. That's a lot of noises. I'm so sorry.
I will get my notes ready. Hang on. Let me get my book out and my pen. Okay.
Just got my pen out.
You can hear my brain actually
overheating.
Oh, I never thought. It's checking out the ingredients. See, can you recognize visually for a start? Then maybe using the microscope or a magnifying glass, something. Can you visually recognize ingredients? So if it's bread, for example, if it's not very well ground into a flour, you might recognize some grains, so you can tell what kind of flour has been used. If you can't, it's going to be down to either complicated analysis, or you're going to have to look at the environment and what the trade, for example, or the agriculture was in that spot at the time. So if you have that information, that the bread comes from this rough area and they were cultivated or trading food with these people or these places, then you could safely assume that it's made out of that kind of flour, that kind of cereal.
Okay.
We know that Lembas bread it's like a special corn that's been ground down from the Undying Lands, don't we?
Yes, of course. Yes.
Of course, we know that.
We know that.
Who doesn't?
Yeah.
Okay, so we would have to look up like what corn was available.
That's it.
The time and the trade routes, like where the Lembas bread was, the ingredients were coming from.
Yeah, and I wonder if we could actually speak to people, right? Because isn't Lembas bread passed down? The recipe is passed down from woman to woman in the Elven community.
Probably.
So I wonder if we could actually do a bit of
traditional knowledge.
Yeah.
Yes.
Ooh, because also that helps, because even though it's like ages and ages away, and ages in like the fourth age or the three age, not like the colloquial, it's been ages. But elves live to be hundreds of thousands of years old. So even if it's a couple of generations of elves, that's still like hundreds of thousands of years of traditional knowledge going on.
Yeah. So they would definitely know about our little piece. Must do.
And they're really good at recording usually.
Right.
Yeah.
So you might find both either historic records or traditional knowledge, ethnography. Some people who might be not very young anymore might still actually use a very similar recipe. Maybe in different parts, maybe more rural or more remote parts of the kingdoms.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that sounds like a good idea. And I wonder, we could maybe talk to the wizards about would it still be imbued with magic to keep your stomach full?
Is magic an ingredient?
Yeah.
Would that be included in the recipe? Take all the magic you have in the house. Take all the eggs you have in the house.
Dangerous.
Take all those
Dangerous
magical
game.
eggs.
2 ladles of magic.
2 teaspoons. Just
A whistle of magic. And what form would the magic take? Would it be, okay, hang on, now I'm getting a deep dive. So would the magic be an ingredient in itself, or would the magic be like a way of processing it? Because you have different, I'm just thinking of baking cakes, right? Where you have fold in the flour or like beat in the eggs, which, by the way, I distinctly remember my French high school class, talking back about high school subjects that we were talking about earlier, French class, and we had to translate recipes, and my goodness, trying to translate words like beat the eggs and fold in the flour, because it's not literal translations. It's very difficult. And that was before Google Translate, peeps listening in. So anyway, that was
so knowledgeable, Tilly.
What can I say? I'm basically an elf. Just so wise. What was I trying to say? Oh, yes. But so is it like magically infuse this? Or is it a method? Is it approach? Or is it an ingredient?
Yeah, Caroline, what would you think?
I always thought it was depending on who was making the food rather than an ingredient. I always considered it as if you are a very powerfully magic with person or baker and you make something, then you can choose the amount or the potency of the magic. But if you're really not very good at magic, you don't have a choice. Either you go to someone who can do it or add more to it, but you yourself can't handle such strong ingredients.
So it's about the cook, not the
I would
recipe.
think so.
Ingredients.
Like when you have a specific... Okay, very medieval. But you go to a selected alewife or a cheesemaker because they are so good at what they make. Everybody makes ale, but that ale is best. That ale is the strongest. This cheese is the one that keeps the longest, etc., etc. So I would see magic like that.
But that means...
it's like when someone else makes you a sandwich. It's so much better when you make yourself a sandwich. Do you know what I mean?
It depends on the person making the sandwich, though. My mother's bacon and mayonnaise sandwiches are pretty damn good.
Bacon and mayonnaise?
I can never cook bacon, mayonnaise, and ketchup. And occasionally there's a fried egg in there as well. And I can never fry the bacon correctly. Also because they don't have bacon in Germany, the same bacon as they do in the UK.
Oh, that's really disappointing. I'm going to send you a care package of bacon. Yeah.
Bacon and Cadbury's cream eggs.
Yes.
But that means... form. Right? Yeah, oh God. No, don't send it to me. It's fine. I'll come visit you and we'll have bacon sandwiches. I'll come visit you from my parents. I'll ask my mother to make me some bacon sandwiches. I'll pack them and I'll come and visit you. Anyway. Okay, good. If you're listening, I love you. But
just don't like your bacon mayonnaise sandwiches.
No, I love the bacon mayonnaise sandwich. It's the best. But that means that not only are we trying to work out the ingredients, not only are we trying to work out the recipe, but we're also trying to work out the kind of cook that we would need, or the kind of baker, because it's bread, that we would need to actually make the Lembas bread.
Yeah, potentially, yes.
This is turning into a way bigger quest than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
It is difficult, isn't it? My point exactly.
Well, but which you were just saying as well, it's funny. You think, oh yeah, you're just making a recipe, but then you have to look into like historic trade records. There's a lot that you have to... What would you say has been like the most random kind of rabbit hole that you've had to dive into when you've been looking up sort of historic recipes?
That's a very good question. There's the frustration ingredients. Oh, so here you go. Like for the archaeologist or anybody interested in that, my question, because I do not have an answer, I am just sharing the frustration. Enjoy. When we look at animal bones in archaeology, you find a pile of rubbish and you have a lot of animal bones, and somebody who's very clever and knows all that, as theologist, will separate them into this is from a pig, this is from cattle, this is from sheep or goats, and etc., etc. And we assume from there, people at the time in that place were eating a lot of cow, a little amount of pig, and a bit of in between sheep and goat. Okay. But at the same time, other archaeologists find objects made out of bone. But that's not getting into the same record. So people at the time slaughter an animal, take the meat, take the blood, take everything. They use every single thing. There's no waste. Okay. They take the bones and they separate them into that's going on the midden pile, and that's going to the bone object maker.
Was
How can I be
official
sure?
title in the medieval period.
This is their job.
So sorry, how can we be sure?
That's the thing. So if a lot of the bones to be turned into useful objects are mainly from cattle, how can I be sure that the amount of cattle bones I find is actually representative of the cattle that was consumed or slaughtered at the time? Because I don't take it into account.
Yeah.
That's very true. What is food and what is making and what is both?
And what is the distinction?
Yeah.
And how often do you hunt an animal and the waste products are actually the food? Like, because you're actually hunting it for its like skin or its bones or its sinew or whatever. And then it's, I happen to have a bunch of meat here. Excellent. I'll eat that as well. And how much of it is actually hunting it for meat? And then the waste products are like the skins and the bones that you then use for things, which is also like hunting,
absolutely,
which has gone completely down. Anyway, that's a long rabbit hole. But okay, so you can even get so you get into trying to look at what kind of meat they might have been using in a recipe, and then you get into a whole rabbit hole of how do you identify the different intentions of the prehistoric hunter in their choice of animal, which
the weird thing is we always end up with a very truncated view of what was the food like at the time. For example, we mentioned that some people were a bit wealthier or much higher in society and they eat a lot of meat and a lot of fish. But I actually would debate that because I worked on a small farm. But basically, if you are a shepherd, you have access to a lot more meat than a potter. And it doesn't matter if the potter is wealthier than you have access to the prime material, you have access to the meat. You probably wouldn't consume it because in any case you need to sell it to make any money at all. But especially for sheep, your money mainly comes from the wool. So technically, for shepherds or for people who own sheep, you would eat a lot more meat or have access to a lot more meat than people who are higher in society, slightly, but do crafts. So we might have this very, maybe Victorian. I always blame the Victorians.
Yeah, always blame them.
It's not the Victorians, it's the Romans.
It's the Romans, the Victorians, and even sometimes the Vikings.
Hot take. Yeah.
And then where are the vegetables? Because that's the one thing we don't see any, really, apart from pollens and charred materials, apart from the environment, where you can assume that maybe dandelion and wild garlic are growing and they probably would use them. It's always, they probably would use them. They would go foraging. Okay. But when do you consider something is a garden and you pick from that garden of wild garlic all the time? So it's very difficult to balance our conceptions of the past with everybody was hunting and a lot of the food was so precious that people wouldn't have access to it. I think, looking at the skeletal remains, that people were fine the majority of the time, and then they die. 14th century plagues, everybody dies. But they have excellent bone structure. They have more than excellent teeth. I'm always very jealous of that.
No
and
sugar,
people live
man.
much longer than we think. But food plays a massive part in that. The problem is we are very limited into what we can actually know from what was eaten at the time.
I wonder if you could do some sort of spatial analysis on, I'm thinking immediately of like black houses and stuff, on where the patterns of like waste are. And then you could plot perhaps where gardens would have been, like
compost heaps.
Yeah, where your compost heap would have been. Maybe where your small vegetable patch would have been. Just immediately, maybe you could do that. You could actually figure that out archaeologically where someone's garden was.
I feel like I might have to talk to my husband about potentially performing experimental archaeology on his gardening business.
Please.
Hopefully your customer will like this as well, darling, but I am just doing a test.
We're just figuring things out.
But okay, so I think even though it sounds like it's going to be an extremely long, extremely rabbit hole filled process, talking about veggie gardens, talking about rabbit holes.
I got it. It did skip past me for a second, but then...
as did the rabbit. But we know, so we're going to try and see if we can do some scientific approaches, looking at the kind of grains that are within it, try and do some visualizations of what grain type is this, what would have been traded at that time, what would have been present in the environment, looking at ethnographic accounts from traditional knowledge of elder elves, for example. Yeah, I think this is a good place to start.
I think we can start there. Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then I guess the last points that while we've got you here, Caroline, while we have an expert in the field, what advice or suggestions would you give to those who are wanting to get involved in, I guess, let's start with in general living history or experimental archaeology? So not necessarily food, but just the general field.
Get in touch with like-minded people, be it living history groups presenting a time period that you like, people that are on the Exarch network, visit your local...
I wonder who they are.
Advertising. Yeah, and go to your local open air museum, go volunteer in some places like that, and take your time at the start, go to events and have a look, chat with people, and pick a group that you feel is welcoming, is doing good research and so on. And if you don't know anything about the period, yeah, of course, unfortunately, you might not be able to tell if this group is very historically authentic or if they are more a nice group to have a social interaction with. In any case, you will have a good time and you will learn the basics, but I would love to say you can also do that on your own, in your own house, which is absolutely true. It is a little bit soul-crushing, though.
Just a little. Tiny bit soul-crushing.
Now that everybody's very connected online, honestly, Instagram, I connected with people all across Europe, asking questions, seeing what they do. And in some countries, some living history groups are so good, so well researched, so nice to chat with, and so on. So, yeah, I would personally say get in touch with people, get out there, read and do some research on your own. But if you're really a beginner and you want to start, there's no better way than actually starting with other people.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And if you've got that gumption to just chat to someone, that's always a good skill.
Yes.
What other skills do you need or required for investigating historic food, do you think, Caroline?
Patience. No, for historical food, I would advise personally to start with recipes. So any time period that have particular recipes, and then change time periods. So start by medieval and then switch to Roman, or compare these different things. Because if you focus on one single time period, you won't understand how it evolved and how fashion changed to get to that point in time. So even if you are interested in, say, Viking food or medieval food, go backwards. Go and have a look at even early time periods, even Iron Age, even Roman, earlier time periods. This way you can get a feel of the evolution of all of this, and it will make more sense.
That's very good advice.
That's very good advice. I like that. Yeah. Nice. Multi-period food.
There you go. Wow. So anyone listening in who wants to dive into the world of experimental food, there you go. There you have some good starting points. Final question. Do you have any interesting projects coming up or anything that you would like to share? Also, where if people want to just find out and follow your projects, where can they find you? Where can they follow you?
I have a website with Pario Gallico. It's not updated. I will be very honest. I'm very bad at it and it takes an awful lot of time. So Instagram, actually, with Pario Gallico is the best platform to follow me, or sending me an email, and I can add people to my usual mailing list. And that's usually sharing what kind of courses and workshops or volunteering opportunities, stuff that either myself or other friends and colleagues and people have going on at the time. But for following, I should actually post about that. Following where I am up until September, I've got three big events, actually, I'm really excited about. Very soon I'll be at Chalk History Festival, which is supposedly, it seems, the largest history festival in the whole of Britain. It's in the south of England, and I'll be in the Iron Age roundhouse, this time with professionals in earth building and chalk cob building. Very local,
cool.
very traditional way. And we'll chat about how this Iron Age supposedly roundhouse has been reconstructed and how it should have been reconstructed, and comparing modern traditional techniques to prehistoric techniques that effectively haven't changed.
Nice.
Then in July, we have a week and weekend of Ancient Caledonia camp. So perfect for you today.
Oh, yeah.
All archaeo-based crafts and practices on the side of a loch in Scotland. And we just learn from different tutors. Say there's a blacksmith, a leather worker, a jeweler, we have paints and pigments, and we cook on the fire. So if you want to learn how to cook historical food, you have either a weekend or a whole week of it to help me feed 25 people. Yeah, and that's Ancient Caledonia Camp is online. I think it's on Ticket Tailor. And the last one is, for the first time, myself and my partner will be at Samara Archaeological Park in the north of France to help visitors take part in the daubing, so the construction of the walls in earth building, of a Neolithic long hall that has just been constructed. So switching time periods completely there.
That sounds so cool. I love the Neolithic. I'm going to be following you for that, definitely.
Oh,
definitely. Thanks for joining us on this quest, everyone. If you enjoy these episodes, please do subscribe and follow wherever you get your podcasts, because it really does help support the show. If you're interested in hearing more archaeology content, please make sure to check out the other shows in the Archaeology Podcast Network. And you can also check out our Dashery shop and get all the and my trowel merch. But thanks, Caroline, so much for joining us. If you have any episode ideas, or if you want to get in touch, you can find all of our contact information, as well as the links and further information on what we just discussed today in the show notes.
Hey, stop that!
What's wrong?
Oh, someone was painting something on the wall of the building.
Oh, actually, that reminds me.
The Archaeology Podcast Network is 10 years old this year. Our executive producer is Ashley Airy, our social media coordinator is Matilda Siebrecht, and our chief editor is Rachel Roden. The Archaeology Podcast Network was co-founded by Chris Webster and Tristan Boyle in 2014 and is part of Cultura Media and DigTech LLC.
This has been a presentation of the Archaeology Podcast Network. Visit us on the web for show notes and other podcasts at www.archpodnet.com. Contact us at chris@archaeologypodcastnetwork.com.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. You chose to hit play on this podcast today. Smart choice. Make another smart choice with AutoQuote Explorer to compare rates from multiple car insurance companies all at once. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Not available in all states or situations. Prices vary based on how you buy.